Well, this morning we have Charlie Mattioli. Did I say your last name right? Good. We corresponded by email, but wanted to make sure I said that right. Charlie has spoken here several years ago. Charlie and his wife, Danae, live near Elizabethton on a hill overlooking some of beautiful eastern Tennessee. Charlie is a member of the Holston Unitarian Universalist Church in Gray. He has served on their board of directors and on various task forces. He's given numerous sermons there on a wide range of topics and has previously presented here 2 years ago. He enjoys covenant groups and adult RE, where new ideas and lively conversation always challenge him to think more deeply about his own spiritual journey. So I will turn it over to you, Charlie. Thank you.
Good morning. It's always a pleasure to come here, and it's one of the joys of being a UU is that you get a chance as a layperson to get up and talk about some things you think about. I like to call my talks reflections rather than sermons. And I had a beautiful drive up here, a little tinge of autumn. It's a little late this year. Usually the trees turn a little bit earlier, but we certainly got a nice announcement last night with the heavy frost in our area. So it's nice to be here. The inspiration for my talk this morning came from by accident. My wife was reading a book for women on daily meditations, and I was quite impressed with it. So one day I was just leafing through it, and I found this quote by Louise Bogan, who is a 20th century poet. She wrote, "In a time lacking in truth and certainty and filled with anguish and despair, no woman should be shamefaced in attempting to give back to the world, through her work, a portion of its lost heart." For some reason, that really got me to thinking. It was a very intriguing quote. I think this idea of giving back to the world is a profound spiritual question. Whether you're a man or a woman, young or old, and for every spiritual persuasion. It really answers a fundamental question. What gives meaning and purpose to my life? I think before trying to answer that I'd like to explore a little bit about some perspectives in history and the human condition, because I think it has a lot to do with how we answer that question in our own spiritual journey. I would like to briefly describe 4 basic views of history and why the ancient Greeks may have grasped the truest and best for us to contemplate our answer. The first view of history sees human history as an inevitable continual climb, a progress measured usually by power, technology, and material wealth. It assumes that we've learned our lessons from history, and that perhaps we're too big or too advanced to be swallowed by that same history that has undone so many past civilizations. It's justifiable in recognizing the great advances we've made as human beings on this planet with our reason and intelligence, but it often overlooks how more dangerous irrationality and ignorance have become today. It seems somewhat blind to how technology, while it brings material wealth and an increased more freedom, also brings with it an increased capacity to kill, to enslave, to control, to dehumanize, and bring disruptive change. There is a second view. You hear it a lot sometimes when you hear people talking, that reveres a golden age in the past or some other civilization. They are seen as more enviable times and more worthy than the present. In fact, many of the times these people say we're going to hell in a handbasket. That's their view of today. This view admires the enduring monuments and records of the past, but forgets the paltry, the vulgar, and foolish ends that too were part of it. This view comes from skewed writings of those who often compare the best ideas and achievements of the past with the meanest of the present. Historian Herbert Muller writes, "So the 13th century is celebrated and summed up as St. Thomas Aquinas, Dante, and the Virgin of Chartres, while the 20th century is reduced to Hitler, Hearst, and the sex queens of Hollywood. We forget," he says, "that every epoch cannot see into the future, that human foible and folly travel every age, that all great civilizations have fallen due to flaws." A third view of history sees history as controlled and ordained by God, by his benevolence and his displeasure. Suffering, decline, and defeat are seen as turning away from God or not regarding his will. Lest you think that's only held by religious fundamentalists, no less a historian than Arnold Toynbee, author of the 12-volume study, The Study of History, concludes his exhaustive narrative of history's rises and falls with this. He wrote, "Our one hope for salvation is a return to the one true God, from whom we have fallen away." Muller, the historian I quoted before, says, "A miracle provided by an unseen supernatural force because we have somehow earned it is an assumption that would not be wise to base our future on." For me, Toynbee's conclusion begs even deeper questions and seems an assertion beyond reasonable thinking and with no historical evidence to support it. But there is another lens to look at history, and I call it the tragic view. It is profound and pertinent because it encompasses reverence and hope, as well as the ironies and the flaws and the paradoxes of human history. It was the Greeks, the ancient Greeks, that were the originators of tragedy, recognizing both virtue and folly in human events. While they recognized this folly and guilt, they did not associate it with sin. Their mottos of their wisest thinkers were very secular. Socrates, know thyself. Aristotle, everything in moderation. Shakespeare captured the Greek spirit in his famous quote, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in the stars, but ourselves." And if you remember, and we in here are old enough to remember President Kennedy, his message in his first inaugural address was fully in the Greek spirit. He said, "With a good conscience, our only sure reward. With history, the final judge of our deeds, let us go forth to lead this land we love, asking his blessing and his help, but knowing that here on earth, God's work must truly be our own." Muller sums up the core of our human condition this way: why it's a tragic situation. Lacking a certain instinct, he wrote, we are free to choose and aspire. Torn by doubt and discontent, our loftiest thoughts and ugliest hates and fears are sprung. We who can know truth and virtue are yet capable of great folly and brutality. All our creative achievements, though they bring advances, are simultaneously disruptive and create new problems. All victorious creeds and policies have unintended consequences. You can certainly see that in today's world. The tragic view tells us this, and this to me is a very consoling thought. We cannot afford to spare the past its troubles. Such enchantment makes the present only more unintelligible and intolerable. We must hold an awareness that all people have strutted and fretted as we do today. This tragic view should not dismay us. Philosopher Alfred North Whitehead wrote, "Civilization is an adventure. It is its discontents and creative energies that bring high achievement. No person who craves security would feel at home in Pericles' Athens, or in Renaissance Italy, or Elizabethan England. We have always had to live dangerously. It is the business of the future. And you and I, we cannot know tomorrow what little thread or large thread will unravel and tear the fabric of our own personal life or our civilization. It was no different in the age of Pericles or Washington. It is a point we must accept and live with, and that may take some courage. But we can derive some solace and inspiration from this. It recognizes both human virtue and folly in every human life and in every epoch. It renews the importance of us taking a responsibility for individual ideas, moral beliefs, and choices. Going back to that quote that we started with, truth and certainty then belong to no age or time. Anguish and despair rest in all of them. So what is the portion of the world's lost heart that Louise Bogan is referring to? Well, it may be the core of what most religions teach. The core: love, compassion, reverence, virtue, justice, the golden rule. Unfortunately, these values are too often lost in the thicket of dogma, doctrine, and assertions that diminish their meaning and importance, that focuses the value of being good on an afterlife's rewards and punishments, and leaves the final judgment in so many matters to church authority. The ancient Greeks were more secular in view and centered the challenge on you, the individual, to contemplate life and become wise. It was about the sense of arete, quality, a striving for excellence in virtue, balance, the search for the true, the good, and the beautiful. They believe humans could perhaps find these things, but not with an acquaintance with God, not with the hope to just merely reiterate a faith or an assumption of his will. And this may seem a very terribly inadequate idea for those who hold organized religion's requirement of faith in one true God, a promised afterlife, or a personal relationship with the supernatural. But here, Herbert Muller, again, the historian, says if history teaches us anything, it is this, and I quote, "No religion, no matter its unity, its ideals, its supreme dominance, has ever lifted an earthly utopia or protected civilization from falling, or even in its highest hours freed us from its own injustice, tyranny, brutality, and a host of other sins we humans seem to be subject to." And he goes on and says, "It is our pretensions to absolute certainty or finality that is our ultimate source of corruption. Why the best can become the worst. Why crusaders for a heaven make a hell on earth." Even for Jesus, the kingdom of heaven was an age that never came, despite his prediction that those he spoke to would see it in their lifetime. The book of Revelations you hear about so much today as being apocalyptic for today's world. If you read its first chapter, it predicted that all that it talked about would happen in the lifetime of those contemporaries or soon afterwards, not ours. History has since plodded on with great human achievements, along with corrosive and corruptive forces that too are part of human events. The tragic view makes us realize we must wrestle with the challenge every age and every life has faced for that lost portion. It supports the idea that each of our lives is important and that we are part of a long chain in human history that contributes to the world and its future, that the foibles and follies we see in our times have been present in one form or another in the past, and that hope and virtue and courage are here too. The only portion of the world's heart we can give back is our own life, well lived. Our best effort to do whatever small part may be granted to us to do. It's about personal integrity, character, and courage. Emerson eloquently describes our task in his essay on self-reliance. A short quote. I hope we've all had this time in our life. It said, "There is a time in every person's life and education when one arrives at the conviction that envy is ignorance, that imitation is suicide, that one must take oneself for better, for worse, that though the wide universe is full of good, no kernel of nourishing corn can come to us but through our toil bestowed on that plot of ground which is given to us to till. The power which resides in us is new in nature, and no one knows what it is, nor can we until we have tried." So the core of my message this morning is that every life, your life, should be thought of and valued as a hero's journey. It's a beautiful and I think accurate way to think about our lives. If civilization is an adventure, certainly our lives must be also. But this heroism is not about public recognition or a one-time act of bravery. It is the quiet, persistent, personal, lifelong challenges every life knows every day. It is about a life journey filled with trials and revelations, physical and spiritual deeds and challenges, defeats and triumphs. It is about our struggle to be reborn again and again, and our grasping for that something larger than ourselves. It is a story that even in the end is known mostly only to ourselves or those we touch in our lives. Joseph Campbell, I'm sure many of you are familiar with his writings, described the hero's path this way. "We have only to follow the thread of the hero's path, and where we thought to slay another, we shall slay ourselves. Where we thought to travel outward, we will come to the center of our own existence. Where we thought to be alone, we will come and will be with all the world." He said this journey from psychological immaturity to courage and responsibility requires death and resurrection. One has to learn to know when to surrender and what to surrender to. One must be in accord with nature. What seems clear is that it's not an easy path. Jesus alluded to the challenge when he said, "Great is the gate and narrow is the way which leadeth to life, and few there be who have found it." And we come to a key question. What is the key to finding this path and staying on it? It's finding your best self and living it. Let me illustrate what I mean by this real-life story. Actor David Oyelowo, who played Dr. Martin Luther King in the movie Selma, some of you may have seen that, was recently on NPR, and he was interviewed. He was born in England of Nigerian parents, and he was told he came from a royal family back in Africa, a fact he really didn't believe or realize until they went back to Nigeria and spent a few years there before coming back to London. This was what he said. "My family's royal heritage did not come with financial or positional benefits, but it did convey a sense of self that has enabled me, as far as I've gone in my life in the West, to carry myself in a way that flies in the face of the world in which I live." He talked about how he was bullied in school because he refused to take on a minority mentality. He said, "I was being called a coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside. Because to be black in the inner city that I was going to was to be abusive to teachers, to be getting as many girls pregnant as possible, and to be in trouble with the law. These were badges of honor where I grew up in North London. So to be a kid who wore his uniform correctly, who was respectful to teachers, put his head down and did his work, was trying somehow to be something other than I was supposed to be. It is in seeking that profound sense of self and shedding those negative notions, whether cast by others or developed in our own self, that is critical. It is that best sense of self, however we derive it, a child of God, a unique being, a life yearning that makes our character, guides our choices, and sustains us. I think it's finding the light inside us, something sages from all over the world have challenged us to do. Religiously or philosophically, it is a sense of self that demands these things. One, we not take our life for granted or as anything less than a remarkable gift. Two, we recognize our life's challenge is to find and seek the true, the good, and the beautiful. That three, we strive for a life of responsibility and integrity. Four, we carry both courage and compassion on our journey. Five, we grow our best self by rebirth. And six, we realize that how we live our life matters not just to us, but those around us and the future. Perhaps the hero's journey was never more colorfully told than in Homer's Odyssey. Odysseus, which is Greek, or Ulysses is the Latin, was a Greek warrior of the great Trojan War, a man of great courage and strength, and even more famous for his cunning. In the Odyssey, he's a man trying to go home, and because of something that happens along the way, instead of a short 2-week journey, it turns out to be a 10-year journey. Some of you may remember the story of the Sirens, the Lotus Eaters, Cyclops, his love affair with Circe, his journey to Hades, his battle with sea monsters, and other struggles. These are not just children's stories. These are allegorical tales that speak to deeper real-life challenges we all face. Temptation, what voices we listen to and ignore, our addictions, our compassion for others, our fears, the difficulty of ending unhealthy attachments, the struggle to be true to ourselves, our need to be reborn again and again, recognizing our own illusions, the need for commitment, wisdom, and courage in the face of fortune and misfortune. Tennyson picks up the story of Ulysses in his poem, where our hero is an old man, again king of Ithaca, wanting to make the most of whatever life may be left. I think we all want to do that. And Tennyson writes these words that come from Ulysses, who says, "How dull it is to pause, to rust unburnished, as though to breathe were life." As though to breathe were life. He asks us, where is our hungry heart? He surrenders to the fact that he is old and death looms for him, as all men. But he insists this, death closes all, yet some work of noble worth may yet be done. He yields to the fact that he's not as strong as he used to be, that danger lurks. And he ends the poem with these famous lines, "Though much is taken, much abides. That which we are, one equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time and fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find, and not to yield." How well he reflects the Greek spirit, the search for the good, the true, and the beautiful, that wonderful embrace of our tragic nature, that sense of adventure for life's journey, the contemplation of mystery and wonder, and the urge to fathom it, individual courage and persistence to see things through. It reverberates with giving back a portion of the world's lost heart through our own life. You remember when Thoreau said it, even fewer words. He said, the only gift, the only true gift, is a portion of thyself. You and I need not step onto some ship to begin our adventure. It began at birth, and we may not be facing sea monsters. We moderns face other more subtle dangers. How we spend not just our dollars, but our life energies. Whether our first and last concern is our soul and character, not wealth and power. Whether the siren call of technology and creature comforts keep us from our neighbors, nature, and a life well lived. Whether we let the silliness and the shallowness of so much that vies for our attention today take us away from what really matters. To sum up, wherever you might be in your spiritual journey, I hope you find and nurture your most profound sense of self, your best self. You find your hungry heart. Rediscover the adventure that life is. Follow the thread of the hero's journey. T.S. Eliot once wrote, to do the useful thing, to say the courageous thing, to contemplate the beautiful thing, that is enough for one man's life. I would say, perhaps, if we practice that every day, that would be enough. Thank you.